Hi everyone, my name is Lyle Wilds, and I'm the guy that always says I spent 20 years growing up, 20 years messed up, and 20 years locked up. And out of those experiences, today I'm speaking up. So what I want to do today is I just want to thank many of you who have requested a address to do the core value process. I have sent you addresses, and some of you did not click onto the address to do the process. So I'm just suggesting that you can still do it because that address is good for about 30 days. So hope you enjoy the process, and those of you who did do it, I want to thank you for doing that. So today I'd like to do something different. I'd like to have a new way of having fun with you. So I asked the question, how is it that some people can have a meaningful, happy, full life? And that's what I want to talk to you about today. But before I do, I want to show you a picture. So many of you may have seen this picture before, but this is a picture here that showed up in the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Steve Covey. And in this picture, you'll either see an old lady, or a picture of an old lady, or a picture of a young lady. So just to point them out for you, this would be the picture of the old lady. This is her 2 eyes, her nose, and her chin, and her mouth. So she's looking down this way. That's the older lady. The younger lady is looking this way, and this is her hair. This is the front of her head with a feather in it. This is her eye, her nose, and her ear, and she's looking off that way. And this is her jaw. So to see both of them, you can see the older lady and you can see the young lady. And when Steve Covey wrote the book, that's what he wanted you to focus on, a way to see 2 different things. I'm going to ask you to see a third thing. And what I'm going to ask you to see is that I've showed this picture to thousands of people, and everyone would say, I see the old lady, I see the young lady, whatever that might be. But today I want you to see something that no one has seen on this picture except one guy. And that one guy pointed out, I said, what do you see in this picture? And he said, I see a porcupine. And everybody in the room laughed. And I said, you see a porcupine? So we talked about the old lady and the young lady. Then I went back to this gentleman and I said, do you really see a porcupine? And he said, I do. I said, would you point him out to me? He said, sure. He said, just take away the faces and make this the hill. And when this is the hill, you have this porcupine whose front legs are right here. The nose and the back is over here, and his back legs are back here. So you can see this porcupine climbing a hill with a lot of grass on it. And everybody in the room goes, wow, I can't believe it, I didn't see that porcupine. So today I'm going to be talking about core values, and I'm going to be talking about them in a way that you wouldn't have normally heard anyone talk about them. So if I came in the room and was talking about the porcupine, and all you saw was the old lady or the young lady, you would think I'm crazy. So I want you to think about and give me the space to talk about core values in a way that you have never heard anyone talk about them before. And so this is going to be about the research that I've done on core values. So I want to talk about my research for just a moment. And that is that I did this with 6 different groups. So I did it with felons coming out of prison, people who have been sentenced to domestic abuse classes, students who are attending the University of Wisconsin leadership classes. I've done it with 13 to 18-year-old children. I've done it with people who are leaders in our community who's attended leadership classes through the local Chamber of Commerce. In doing that, I had to identify what I was going to have them do and how I was going to have them do it. So first of all, I asked them to tell me what their core values were. And when they told me them, they were like core values the way they wanted to live. So I had to figure out how to get them to find the core values that they actually lived. So I had 38 core values identified, and then I asked the people to do the core value process by eliminating the values they didn't like as much as the ones that they were holding in their hands. And so when they did that, they'd take 9 out, and they'd get down to the final 5, which was really difficult for them because they had to decide what they valued. And as I did that, I identified the 6 different groups had common core values. And those common core values are listed here: happiness, relationships, respect, loyalty, and adventure. And so I would just like to say that 6 out of the 6 groups had happiness. So 6 out of the 6 groups picked relationships. 5 out of the 6 groups picked respect. 4 out of the 6 groups picked loyalty and adventure. They also picked wellness, forgiveness, creativity, integrity, compassion, independence, and humor. But the ones that are listed below this, only one group had picked those particular ones. So these are the ones that all 6 groups had in common. And when you think about adventure, loyalty, respect, relationships, and happiness, if you lived those, you'd never go to prison. And if you lived those, you'd always have wonderful relationships. So people would go to prison. People have chaos in their lives, and some people don't have very good relationships. So I asked them, have you ever violated any of these? And they all said they had. So when we started to talk about what did they value at the time that they violated these, I got a completely different response. So instead of having them pick the ones they didn't value, I just had them pick out what value did you have to violate these. And that's what I want to move to next. So the next is going to be the core values that they picked that caused them to violate these. So by identifying the core value of violators, all 6 groups picked many of the same ones. So, for example, control was the violator that they said they had to violate happiness or whatever it might be. And then they picked being right, instant gratification, greed, and power. And some of the other ones that they picked was security, money, perfection, order, status, structure, and accountability. But the ones below this, out of the 6 groups, each group, there'd be one group would pick one of those. So these are the common core value violators that they lived to violate their original core values. So the question came to my mind, if you have the same violators and the same core values, why would you have different outcomes? So if you have different outcomes, that means to me that core values do not drive your life. Something else is driving your life. So just by accident, I happened to ask them if they would just tell me 3 beliefs that they have that they do not want to give up. They do not want to give up. So you have a belief that you may not want to give up. Some of those beliefs are, I believe human nature is good. I believe you can trust humans. It's a really trustworthy world to live in. Or you might have the belief that people are corrupted at birth and you can't trust them. You got to manage them, you got to watch them, you can't trust them. And so as they listed all their beliefs, I found that the categories of those 2 beliefs broke down into 2 categories. Number 1, the category where you believe the world you live in is a safe place, people are good, and you live in a world of abundance. The other belief that I've discovered is that people live in a dangerous world, they don't trust people, you're suspicious, and people are corrupted in their very nature. And so when you think about that, how would that relate to these core values? So when you live in a world with a belief system that it is a world that's safe, you have abundance, you're willing to share, you trust people, you're happier, life is great, you feel fulfilled. But when you live in a world that's dangerous, then you're skeptical, you're suspicious, you're untrustworthy, people are untrustworthy, and it's a scary world that you live in. And so when I decided to see that unfold in my life, I decided if you live in a scary world, if you live in a world where you don't trust people, That means that you got to control them. You got to have power over them. You got to have those things. But we all have them. So if you live in a world that's not trustworthy, then these become amplified. But if you live in a trusting, loving world and you trust your fellow man, then these become more powerful. So the power of the two different sets of values is not that you live this way all the time. It's that you can be triggered. And when you're triggered, then these values here will override those, and you will have, in less than 1 minute, you will have destroyed your relationship. So when you live in a friendly world, you have abundance. You're kind. Life is meaningful, and you're safe. So in the next video, I want to tell you why this is so important to talk about being triggered. Because if your core values do not drive your life, then what are the triggers, and how do the triggers come into play to cause life to be successful, failure, successful, failure, successful, failure, and it becomes a pattern to your life. And I can tell you, having worked with felons, having worked with people who have been sentenced to courts, and having worked with people who've gotten divorces, it's interesting how they describe the world in a way that's untrustworthy. One of the most common things in a relationship is if they say, I don't trust that person, there's a whole different set of responses that you have than if you say, I really trust this person and I'm going to trust them forever. There's a difference in that whole process. So next week, we're going to talk about how neurology relates to core values. Thank you very much. See you in 2 weeks.